Okay, guys, so I'd like to welcome you to the second of my interviews for the podcast with the Pathway to Profit mentoring program. My name's Shona. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Dina Cohen. Is that correct?
That is.
Yeah. And Dina, I'm going to let you explain a lot more about yourself in a moment, but just very briefly, I've been running these podcasts, started them about 4 or 5 years ago to try and help with my background. I've been a practitioner for 50 years. I started the mentoring and working with yoga teachers to help them with their businesses about 4 or 5 years ago. Started these podcasts about 4 or 5 years ago. Do you know what? I've not been regular with them as much as I would have liked to. And I want that to be an inspiration to you to know that that's the way life happens sometimes. It's stop start. Um, but I started these interviews thinking it would be really nice to collaborate with other yoga teachers who have been teaching for a while, gained lots of experience, maybe gone through the bruises and the challenges of having to start to build their own businesses up. And I met Dina as a result of putting something out there in the yoga teacher group, the Yoga Teacher UK collaboration group, because I think it's great to collaborate and to speak with other yoga teachers. And Dina very kindly responded. And the more that I've researched and looked at what Dina's been up to over the last few years, the more fascinating I think this talk is going to be. So enough about me. This session will probably be about 35, 40 minutes. I'll try and keep it to that. It's longer than the normal podcasts, but I think when you've got somebody fascinating to speak with, it's worth listening and spending that little bit more time. So, Dina, I'm going to hand over to you and start by just telling us a little bit about your background, how you fell into yoga, which I think I found was fascinating when I read your bio. Tell us a little bit about that and whatever you think is relevant about how you started your business to where you are today. Shoot.
Gosh, that's a lot. So yeah, well, I've been teaching yoga for 25 years. It started, well, I was just kind of going to a weekly class, and then in the very, very early days, there weren't kind of yoga retreats and stuff like that, but I did somewhere heard someone talking about some place she went to in Ibiza, um, to and she went on this yoga retreat and she stayed in a teepee or something, and I don't know, it sounded really fascinating. And then I was going to this kind of once a week yoga class, but I wasn't, really thinking about anything very much. But I turned up in Ibiza to go on this yoga retreat, and I was just like, this is just me all over. I was working in the music industry. I was into the kind of rave scene in back in the day in the 90s. And
Whoa.
so Ibiza was like a hot destination. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is all my things that I love all in one place. And turns out the teacher there, his name's Godfrey Devereaux, has a mixed reputation these days. But anyway, he was running a teacher training. And so I was like, hey, can I do your teacher training? And he said, actually, come back in a year, which is a really good thing because that doesn't happen these days.
No.
It's just like pay the money, do the teacher training, doesn't matter how
Why did
experienced
he
you are.
say? Was it something that you'd said that made him say that?
He just said you're not experienced enough, just come back in a year when you've done, when you've got more into the because I was, I just thought it was fun and I didn't know anything about anything. Um, but I was just kind of thinking, no, that would be a fun job to have. Um, but he took it all very seriously, and he wanted people who'd practiced with him for longer, who'd really put in the time and showed commitment. Um, and that is lacking from teacher trainings. I have to say, these days you can do these, 1 month teacher trainings.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much experience you've got, you don't need to know anything. Anyway, by the by. So yeah, I did the teacher training, but kind of didn't really realize how I did it a year later, but realized how inexperienced I was. So didn't really think that I would become a full-time yoga teacher. But actually in those days, there weren't that many yoga teachers. So it was really easy to find work. Someone who I'd done the training with asked me to cover her class. And I was like, really? I don't know what I'm doing here. But I did. And I was like, okay, you can do this. And yeah, you just turn up at gyms and say, do you want a yoga teacher? And they go, oh yeah, we don't have yoga on our schedule. Yeah, let's do, that it was like that then.
Right. How
So
long
I
ago was this, Dina?
25 years ago, no, 2000.
Right.
Yeah. So I did that. Yeah, so I worked in lots of gyms,
You
managed.
described one of the things I noticed on your bio was that you led what you called a hedonistic lifestyle, and was that what was it about yoga that appealed to you? I found that really interesting.
Well, I guess what the bit of yoga that I really liked was the idea of putting yoga to music and
Okay.
doing kind of a strong practice. I was really into a strong practice because I was into everything being quite big and energetic.
Yeah.
Um, and I found that having done this retreat and then the training and done the yoga practice, it was a really good balance to my slightly crazy life out there because it actually brought me into stillness. Even though I was doing quite a strong practice, it kind of brought me into stillness, which wasn't something that I was able to do. I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. In fact, the first time I ever tried to meditate, because I read a book, um, and they went, yeah, just set a little alarm and sit there and whatever, do whatever you do. And I sat there with my eyes closed thinking, oh God, I've been here ages. And it was like 1 minute. That was where I was at. So
I
I
know
guess
that feeling.
I've always kind of thought of myself as not really yogi, and I've always that kind of imposter thing. But these days I realize that, there's every kind of yogi. You don't
Yes.
have to be like this or like that. You don't, have to do certain things or specific practices or whatever. It's a state of mind, a way of being, a lifestyle, but there are many variations thereof.
Absolutely. Do you know what? And I know this is maybe going slightly off at a little bit of a tangent, but that's what I think, I hope is interesting about this for people. I couldn't agree more with you because I find two things that you've said there. The first is the fact that you liked a really strong practice, but what you actually found was that that helped you to feel calmer. That actually gave you more access to mindfulness than sitting there for what felt like an eternity and feeling as though you were doing nothing. And I bet there are lots of our listeners, and I certainly resonate with that because I came and my students would resonate with that. You know, when I think about the students who come to me, they come to me, and I know this because they fill this in on the registration forms, and I had on my question, one of the questions on the registration form is, what motivated you to walk through this door? What motivated you to come to me? And most of them, it's not about, they're not quoting things like being mindful and meditating and all the rest of it. They'll talk about de-stressing or they'll talk about flexibility and so on. But then what they actually realize is that through the movement, they can start to feel that meditative quality. The mindfulness doesn't mean being mindful. I'm a big advocate of Sam Harris. I don't know whether you've used Sam Harris and the Waking Up app. And anyone who's listening, look him up because he's the first meditation mindfulness teacher I have ever found that I've stuck with for any length of time. But this whole concept of just realizing that you don't have to be sitting still to end up in a mindful, reflective, calmer state of being is a really powerful one. And the other piece, so I'm completely with you on that. The other piece that I really think resonates for me from what you just said is there is too much dogma, I think, sometimes in yoga about what a yoga teacher should be and should look like. And and that if you're not doing Sanskrit and if you're not teaching XYZ and so on and about the chakras and whatnot, then you're not a proper yoga teacher. But I think there's a journey for all of us. And and the journey that we are probably best to teach is the one that we've been through and that
Mm.
we've found helpful because that means we're then aligned with it. So I suspect that what you've developed and built from there is very much your own style.
Well, very much because I've, in the end, did loads of other trainings because that's kind of what you do once you get into it. So, you know, exploring all different avenues, and particularly at the start, you know, the vinyasa flow and, you know, this kind of dancey style of yoga, and, you know, strong, more challenging arm balances and stuff like that was really appealing to me. You know, as you mentioned as well, you know, I wanted to master that handstand,
Understand.
still trying. but over the years, with all the different trainings, you know, I did yin and restorative. I did a year-long mindfulness training, so I can now, you know, I can now sit for a long time, and I find it
Okay.
really
Out of interest, who
engaging.
did you do it with, Dina? Is it someone you would
Um,
recommend?
yes, it's called the Mindfulness Training Institute,
Right.
and my teacher is Martin Aylward.
Okay.
Mindfulness Training Institute.
So if anyone is listening to this podcast right now or watching it, and you are interested, I'll put that, what do you call him? Martin Aylward.
Aylward, yeah. He's written a great book, which I have right here as it goes. Awake Where You Are. See, look, I
Like where
even
you
with
are.
a few little tags. Awake Where You Are. That's his book.
Okay.
But he runs a retreat center in France, but they do trainings also. I think they do a UK based one and also a US based one.
Okay, that's really
Yeah.
interesting, useful, and I'm sure there might be some of our listeners who'd be really interested in that too. So you found that really helped you with the mindfulness piece.
Yeah, so he, you know, so I did that training. I've done so many trainings. I've done lots of yoga nidra training. I've just kind of explored out in all
Everything.
directions from this kind of really dynamic strong. I was into Ashtanga quite a lot at the start. Don't do it, not well, it kind of influences everything. But um yeah, I just went in every direction, kind of feeling out there to all the different practices, which really gave me lots of material so that now when I run retreats and trainings, I've just got so much
Mm,
content sort of out there to kind of choose from.
yeah.
Um, and all of those things have a place. You know, I'm not just like, oh yeah, I only do yin, or I only do this, or I, you know, I love that I now have all these different tools in my toolbox. And so for my own practice, I can just take what I need. Because actually currently my early morning thing that I do is I get up, get on my push bike and go to the women's pond, which is near to where I live, and swim all year round. And
I
that's my
remember
thing. That is,
I remember you telling me, guys who are listening, I remember Dina telling me this when we had the first phone call about setting up this interview, and just being absolutely awestruck about the commitment to do that every single day, come rain or shine, whatever the weather.
yeah,
It's
that's been my committed practice, so that, you know, it's a meditation as I swim around, and, you know, I'm looking at the darks, but I'm feeling, you know, I'm sensing my body. I kind of work through what's going on for me first thing in the morning, what's on my mind. You know, I'm just at peace with nature, and I find that is, you know, is the morning practice that I'm currently addicted to. But I have been addicted to lots of different morning practices over the years. But so the yoga, because I do so much yoga anyway, teaching it, and then I do, you know, bits of practice here and there, but it's not like it used to be that I get up in the morning and I do my 30 minutes meditating and then I do my 45 minutes yoga practice. You know, that's kind of changed throughout my life.
yeah,
So
yeah. So this sounds absolutely fascinating. So you started out when you first started teaching, you started out just covering. Tell us how your business evolved.
I started covering, and then I think I probably got a class where I was covering, and then, you know, in a gym or something. I was teaching in gyms, and then this kind of studio fitness place opened kind of near to me, and I started my own class there. So I was hiring the space.
And at the
Um,
time, were you still working as a journalist or
I was doing a little bit of freelance music
okay?
work, but it was kind of the more I got into yoga, the more that didn't really fit with me. And again, that was one of the things, like these days, being a yoga teacher, you really have to promote yourself. And I was kind of more, and actually, it was really easy to find yoga work. You know, there wasn't so many yoga teachers. So I was teaching, 12, 14, 16 classes a week quite easily. And I was much younger, so I had the energy to do that, traveling all over London. I was really happy to, travel here, there, and everywhere. Had, private clients kind of appeared out of nowhere. I think I was working at Tri Yoga, which was a main kind of, big yoga center in London. And so I got private clients from them. I mainly got private clients from teaching classes and them coming along saying, oh, actually, do you do one-to-one?
Yeah.
A few I just got randomly. They found my website. I got a website eventually. And
That's interesting. Because again, if we're thinking about business here, how long did it take you to get a website up, Dina?
I was a few years, maybe,
Okay.
to be honest, I
And I
can't
guess people
remember.
listening now will know that, as you say, it's very different now in terms of how competitive it is.
Yeah.
And perhaps the fact that you were in central London where you've got some of the bigger, it was an era where there were fewer and but there were, you had more opportunities across London, I guess.
Absolutely. So if I was happy to, which I'm not nowadays, I'm not willing to teach that many classes. I'm not willing to travel all over London.
Yeah.
I've actually got a studio in my house here where I live. It's very convenient.
Absolutely. You must tell us about how you set that up. But before you do, let's come back to that. Park that for a moment and come back to that. So, so you set up the website. Tell us a little bit about the private and how, because I know that one of the things that um, teachers that I work with will often, or I see in threads, will often talk about is they're thinking about doing private clients, but they worry about pricing and how to charge and how to structure that and so on. When you first got those first kind of opportunities, how did you structure that? How did you go about structuring it?
But there's kind of like a going rate in London, which
Right.
has just gone up and up for kind of, visiting private
Out
clients.
of interest, what is the going rate in London right now? And if you're
Well,
watching this, this is June 2025.
yeah, well, I don't actually teach private clients anymore, except the odd one that comes here. But I would say anything from like 80 to 120, depending on how experienced you are. Obviously there's different levels. But I think at the time, I was just so happy to have work, and there were not so many yoga teachers, so it was just much easier. I didn't really have to look for private clients, and also like corporate clients. I got people who came to my classes who said, "Would you come and teach at our office? We've got a space." So it just kind of happened. So corporate clients, you can charge 150, in London.
Yeah.
Um, it just kind of depends what kind of what kind of place it is. But I was just very lucky. 25 years ago, it was just very different terrain and it was much easier. There weren't a lot of yoga teachers. I knew most of the yoga teachers in London. We
Yeah.
knew of each other.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was a very different environment, and it wasn't so competitive. I mean, we still were like, how many classes do you teach? But you can't maintain that. You can't
Yeah.
maintain 14, 16 classes
No.
a week.
And when did you start? When did that begin to change? When and how did you kind of morph towards more what you're doing now? Tell us
Well, I
about
guess
that.
I started running like workshops, like afternoon, which I've noticed now they call them day retreats. Well,
Yeah.
that like wasn't a thing. Like, but anyway, we called them workshops. And so I started running workshops. That was my kind of first foray into out of, just classes. And then from workshops, I started doing, oh, I think I got this job actually teaching for a yoga retreat place. There was also in Ibiza because I kept going back to see my teacher there anyway. But that wasn't like I wasn't running the retreat. I was paid really badly, but I got a 3 weeks holiday in Ibiza and I had to teach for like 3 hours a day. I probably wouldn't do that, but a lot of people came through there and I got them on my mailing list. And I think that's really important, collecting email addresses. And I still have people from then, 20 years ago, who came to my retreats in Ibiza, who sometimes come to my things now.
Wonderful.
So it's really, I just wanted to get myself out there. That was my main thing. I wanted to teach classes. I wanted to run workshops. I wanted people to find me. And so I just put all these things on and go to Ibiza. So I think I went for a month at one point. So I had different people each week. So my mailing list grew and I did that for quite a few years. And then I started putting on weekend retreats in the UK. So it's not quite such a big leap, to actually putting on your own retreats. And I think more I tended to go and work for retreat centers. I did that for a few different places before I actually took the plunge and started my own retreat. But in fact, that started because somebody who'd been to one of my retreats in Ibiza was opening a place in Goa, and said, do you want to come and teach in Goa? But, you'll have to bring your own students. So I think I started the first year I did that one, and it wasn't particularly well organized, the place. I didn't, because I have actually learnt my lesson running retreats and just turning up to random venues that I haven't checked out before. But I mean, it was good enough. But I think I had like 7 people come on that retreat, and most of them were my friends. But that was 18 years ago. And so last year, I stuck with that place. It changed management and got much better, and then they've moved to another beach, and I've been going there every single year. And last year I had 26 people on my
Wow.
retreat that I started out with 7. So
Wow.
this coming year I'm going to do 2 back to back, one week and then another week, because 26 people was quite a lot. Actually, it's quite a big group, and I prefer to have 2 smaller groups. But we'll see. It could be very different this year. I might end up with 2 tiny groups. I don't know. It's always a risk. But yeah, so I started doing that. And then after a few years, another yoga teacher I knew was running a teacher training, and she said, would you like to come and teach like a bit of yin and the mindfulness part of it? And so I did that on her training, and then we ran a teachers retreat together. There were just lots of different things from, it's a lot about who you know and
Yes.
collaborating with other people. Um, and yeah, it's just sort of, it's sort of evolved kind of without, I think I've had an idea of what I wanted to do.
To what extent would you say, because, and this is, I ask this because this is one of the things that I talk about quite a bit in my mentoring program. There, I think it's really interesting, the kind of, the difference between letting it kind of evolve and just see where it takes you, but also having a vision about what, or having a vision about what it is you want it to look like. Did you, and maybe there's a bit of a tension between those two, because sometimes I find that if I don't have, me personally, and this is one of the things I teach on the mentoring program, if I don't have a clear vision, at least of how I want the business to look. So for example, part of my background was that I set up a business. I quit the corporate world, was a bit like you, was in on a corporate ladder that kept leading me higher and higher. And it was all very flattering, and there was lots of money involved, and it all felt great until you suddenly realize that the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall and you're feeling really miserable. And I needed to change gears and so on. And so I jumped ship at 50 and left all that very naively and went into a business and started up a business on my own using my psychology and my coaching background and my teaching and training background, and went into corporate coaching, leadership, management, and stuff like that, and started to build my first business. Realized how naive I was and how much I'd got to learn. But the lesson that I learned, and it was eventually successful, and I realized that the training that I got and the baptism of fire I got building that first business was what really helped me to build the second yoga business much quicker. But what happened then, the first time round, it was much like you describe, kind of like just sucking and seeing, and I'm not quite sure where this is going, but just taking every opportunity. The second time round with the yoga business, it was much more a case of that first business ran my life. This time, my life, my life comes first, and the business has to work around that. And I think that came with age as well. So one of the things that resonated for me when you talked about that earlier was the fact that it was too much doing all those classes, and you've pulled back from doing the one-to-ones. I guess for me, to what extent do you think there's a balance between just letting things happen, but being mindful of the fact that if you're not careful, you end up like I did, where you don't necessarily want to be on that ladder, looking down, thinking, "How did I get here? Because this isn't quite where I want to be." Does that resonate for you? How
Yeah,
does that?
I like the way you say leaning against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
And I do think it's really great to have a destination in mind, but it's, the journey, as we always say. And 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 not to try and get it all too quickly, because you have to build it. The whole thing about, the yoga business is that you need people to know about you. You need people to have been to your classes and to say to their friends, "Oh, you need to go on a yoga retreat. I know this great teacher that I went to, and she's running something in, that's how it I'm not so great at marketing. And I think maybe if you really know how to work the Instagram algorithm or whatever it is, and you can do that, maybe you can build your business that way. But for me, it was all about, word of mouth, a creating a bit of noise in the yoga world, and having a bit of an eye on where I was going. And I'm always kind of looking out. So, when I'm looking through things, when I'm looking on social media and stuff, and I look at, what other teachers do, I follow lots of other teachers, and I look at where they're running their retreats. I look at what trainings are going on. I look at stuff, and my mind's always kind of thinking, I'm always checking out retreat centers. I mean, I only use very few. I don't do that many retreats, but I'm always looking for the perfect place. And so, yeah, just building it, having a kind of, half an eye on where you want to go, but thinking about the steps that you need to take to get there. So, from day retreats to weekend retreats, from weekend retreats to 5-day retreats, and building it slowly. And, not, I mean, it's risky. Every time that you book somewhere to run something, you're taking a risk. You may not get enough people every time you hire a studio and you're trying to fill your classes, so it's kind of balancing, and there is a risk. There's always a risk.
This is gold. This is absolute gold, really, because I know, I talk about in some of the training and that I talk about the stages of building a business,
Mm.
and that you can't I talk about 4 stages of business, and that first piece, everything you've just described about your journey and the way you went about it, for me, is the right way to go about it. It's about understanding that there are certain things you need to learn. There is a risk. It takes some courage. I see so many yoga teachers these days who try to do everything on next to no budget whatsoever. I'm not saying you can't do it on a shoestring, and you should be careful about what you invest in and smart about what you invest in, but there needs to be some kind of there needs to be some. You cannot run a business without some element of risk at some point, and having the courage to be able to jump into that. So I hope people who are listening are really. There's a lot that Dina just said there that I think is absolutely vital that you understand about. It's a journey. You can't, one of my expressions is, apart from sort of, finding the ladder leaning against the wrong wall, you can't be CEO in a week. So what I see is here is yoga teachers who jump in, and they want the online business where the gurus promise you thousands, for that doesn't happen unless there are other building blocks and
Yeah.
foundations in place.
Yeah.
And what I hope you are hearing from Dina is is how many building blocks two things two really key messages, I think, that nuggets I want people to hang on to what you've said. You've had this eye out. I call it your antennae. You
Mm,
have your antennae out. You've got a kind of rough idea of where you want it to go. And this is another key thing that's a message for me that I want anyone who's listening to understand. Just because you set a destination doesn't mean you have to stick to that, but it's useful to have an idea of where you're going because that will help you to decide on the early steps. And then what you'll find, which I think is what seems to have happened to you, Dina, is that at each step you've taken, you've seen other opportunities.
mhm.
But if you hadn't taken those steps first, those opportunities might never have appeared. It's
Yeah.
only because you took those opportunities and you met somebody or somebody then said, would you like to join this? That opportunity would never have happened if you hadn't done the step before then. And it's kind of it's these building blocks and this willingness to realize it ain't gonna happen. You're not gonna build a six-figure business, particularly now. The other thing I think that you said, Dina, was about, maybe it's possible to post on Instagram no, it's not. You know,
Thank you.
if there's one thing I've learned, that's a myth and it's a lie. And the people who are trying to post always on Instagram, that is not the place where you're going to build your business. You need to have, some of the solid things that you've been putting in place as part of your journey, to me, are what have helped you to get you to, something that feels more solid and reliable. So let me ask you, I mean, do you just teach yoga now? Is that it? Is that your job, your career?
I kind of say I run a yoga business, I guess. So, I teach a few classes. I
Yeah,
run trainings and retreats, and that is my primary income now.
yeah,
But I am also training to be a psychotherapist.
yes.
Yeah. So, not because I want to get out of yoga, but also because I want to learn more things. And I've done so many yoga trainings, I'm kind of want to move in a different direction, but also because I'm looking forwards now. I'm 63. In 10 years time, I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't know how I'm going to be in 10 years time. I don't want to stop teaching. I love teaching yoga. I really enjoy it. And I love all my students who some of them have been with me for so long.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to just kind of take it in different directions and maybe incorporate some of what I'm learning in the psychotherapy area into my yoga, maybe bring some of what I know. Honestly, on my psychotherapy training, it's amazing. I sit in a room with people and they don't know anything about breathing. And so I've got, the two areas really complement each other.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. My background, I studied an Open University course on psychology in my 30s when I fell pregnant with my first child. Maybe not good timing, but um, but I bring so much of what I've learned from psychology, all, CBT trainings, mindfulness. There is so much linked with mindfulness, meditation, breathing, and your psychotherapy training. There is so much linking and so much that can help to support. And I bring that into the day retreats and the teachings with my own students,
Mhm.
because the other piece that I think you said that, again, I completely agree with, and I encourage anyone who's listening to do as part of building these foundations for you to be a really good teacher and a smart business, something that actually lasts, which is the more you learn and the more you support your own development and learning. And as Dina mentions, build a toolbox. You talked about having different tools. You're not particularly struck with one thing. I found that very much in my psychology training too. There were some people who you might have heard of neurolinguistic programming.
Mhm.
And I know
Mhm.
you definitely will. And I haven't done the master practitioner, but I've done a diploma in NLP. And there are some people that I've found in the coaching world that would literally just focus on one particular tool, CBT or NLP or whatever, and think. But what I've found, both for me and for people I work with and try and coach or help, is that one tool doesn't fit all. And there are some tools, one of the things that I will say to my own students is I'm going to share some things with you that I've found are helpful for me, either from yoga or psychology or coaching or whatever. Some of what I share might leave you cold and you think, well, it's not helping me at all, Shona. But something might just land for you and you think, oh, that's what you put in your toolkit.
Mhm.
You build your own toolkit and you work from there. And that's what you're doing. That's what you've done with your kind of building the foundations for where you're going next.
Mhm.
Love it. I hope people are taking loads of nuggets away from this because there's stacks. So tell us a little bit about your studio. I'm conscious of time, but tell us a little bit how you built your studio and your next steps with psychotherapy. And then we will bring it to a close. I could talk to you forever, but we will bring it to a close. But if there's anything coming up with the retreats and so on, we'll finish with any retreats that you've got coming up. That if anybody is interested and would like to work with Dina, we'll send you her way, and I'll make sure that I put the links in the emails and the podcasts and whatnot that go with it. Tell us how you started your studio briefly.
It just came about because I started seeing someone
Right.
who was another yoga teacher, quite well-known yoga teacher now, but this was
Right.
17 years ago. And we were both very fortunate in that we both had property at that time. So we both sold up and bought a house together.
Right.
Um, and made one of the rooms, we knocked a wall out and made one of the rooms into a yoga studio.
Okay.
So
How
we
many
are
can
not,
it hold?
I'm sorry.
How many can it hold?
I could squeeze 13, let's say. I used to cap it at 12, but I could squeeze 13. But now, because I've got it hybrid and I've got my Zoom screen, and I can't have quite as many in there. So maybe like 9 or 10 now.
Right.
Um, but yeah, we're no longer together, but I've ended up here. So yeah, that's worked out for me. It's got its pros and cons. It's in the middle of the house. It's on the first floor.
Right.
So um, students come in, they walk straight up the stairs and into it, and there's a loo on that floor. But it does mean there's people coming in and out up the stairs. We don't have a reception. It means I have to open the door. I have to make sure the door is properly closed at the end. It's not like a regular yoga studio. They're coming into my house. And I think that really appeals to some people.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't appeal to other people. They want to go to a yoga studio. They want more people. They want, more thing. But what's happened is because I've been here for so long, it's like most of my neighbors are coming round and we all know each other, and it's like a kind of social,
Yeah.
and they've kind of grown up with me over all these years. So we've all kind of, we all kind of aged, and menopause happened and everyone was having menopause. I've done a menopause training as well. Actually, I did a psychotherapy presentation on menopause. Very interesting. But I'd like to say just one little point on menopause. If anyone's interested, so much light at the end of the tunnel. It's a messy business when you're in it, but coming out the other side, I have to say, just hold on. It's good on the other side.
I agree with you because I'm well past that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm 73 next week, so
Fantastic.
I'm well past that, and I completely agree. If you're
Yeah,
listening, hold on.
yeah, hold on. It's a messy business. But anyway, sorry, I just digressed
Go on,
there.
that's all right.
But, um, yeah, I would like it. I would prefer it if it was next door or if it was in my back garden or whatever it is, if it was somewhere else, and now I've got my husband lives with me here, and he has to put up with the people coming in and out, which is why I don't have that many classes here anymore.
Yeah,
Because, it's just having people coming in. I do hire it out sometimes.
yes.
But yeah, it definitely has changed up. And now this is the only place that I teach
Yeah.
regular weekly classes. I don't
And
teach.
your teaching, I understand, has changed a little because another reason I was interested in talking to you, you said you work with bands, you're tending to work with older, you've kind of slowed down your approach to teaching. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I still teach a dynamic practice, and I love,
Yeah,
my vinyasa flow to music. I'm still really up for it. And because a lot of my menopausal, middle, pre, post menopausal
yeah,
students, we need to work on strength. And
absolutely.
but they also need rest and relaxation. So restorative, yin, all fantastic. But I teach a chair yoga class, which again, because my studio is on the first floor, so it does have to be people that can get up the stairs. But now, it's kind of grown, and I've got all these students in their like 60s and 70s. It's not like care home chair yoga, which was where I started with chair yoga. It's, it's much more dynamic. But we use bands for that because it's very difficult without doing kind of chaturangas and planks and things like that. It's very difficult to get some of the strength things going on with the chair.
Yeah.
So yeah, we use bands, and they're really enjoying it. I mean, that has been my kind of that I started that chair class because I used to teach it at a yoga studio chair, but in the pandemic, I just took it online. Um, and some of them followed me, and now I've got all these people, coming to the house. It's fantastic. And I love my chair yoga. It's super sociable. They just, they all know each other by name. They all, chat about what's going on in their lives. That's what I love about yoga, actually, the human social sort of
Yeah.
aspect of it. And having, a community studio, because I used to teach at some of the top London studios. I didn't find them very friendly.
Mm.
And I tell you what, I was in New York last year. And while I was there, I thought, right, I'm going to try out yoga classes in New York. And I went to all these fancy zhuzhy studios there. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody spoke to
No
me at
one.
all. And I was like,
Not
hey,
even,
I'm from
not
London.
even a teacher or welcomed you
Not
or
really, no, no, not really, no.
anything.
They would just, I was like, wow, okay, I get you. Um, so,
And
uh,
that's one of the things that I love, certainly, about the classes that I, like you, I've been teaching now for 12 years. And some of those students have been with me for that long. Most of them are, once they come, they tend to stay for quite a while. And it really is. There's a lovely sense of camaraderie and community, and I even we joke about it. Some of my students act as almost like, because I have attendance sheets that they sign when they come in and whatnot as well. And some of my students have taken over as almost like a prefect duty, and they make sure that if new people come in, they welcome them. They're almost doing my job for me.
yeah,
And you'll be
yeah.
all right and come and stand. And it's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is, and I just kind of think actually this is what yoga is. It's,
Yeah,
being present with
yeah,
our lives, with our messy lives, and
yeah,
actually being real. Because
yeah.
I think when I started teaching yoga, I was very much like, oh, I need to talk like a yoga teacher in my yoga teacher's voice. And also my training with the guy that I trained with who had been kind of Iyengar trained, he used to like fire off instructions like a kind of sergeant major. And I found that I was doing that and that I wasn't part of it. It was just I was firing off these instructions. But in these years, I guess I've just softened and I found my own style. But I'm bringing myself. I talk about myself. I mean, I don't sit there talking about myself the whole class, but I bring my life into the class. And I think my students appreciate that. They want you to be human. They want you to have, imperfections. They don't want you to be able to do everything. I make mistakes. I forget to do something on the second side. And, they don't mind. I mean, I don't do it all the time and I kind of know what I'm doing, but yeah, I say, oh, what should we do today? Oh, I don't know. What do you feel like? It's just kind of a relaxed thing. And I'm a human person sharing what I know to the best of my ability. And sometimes I get it wrong.
But like you say, I think that's why your students love you and stay. I think that's exactly. There are so many nuggets. I'm going to take there'll be bits of this that I'll kind of chop up and put as little nuggets for reels. But what you've just said is again more gold. Finding your voice, being you. It's so easy to come out from teaching and try and teach like you've been taught because you think that's what you need to do, or you haven't got the confidence, or you haven't yet got I call it getting your teeth around what you need to say, how you need
Mm,
to say it.
mm,
And you know what? My students, I have one particular student I'm thinking of now, a guy who comes with his wife and have been with me for years. And he comes to 3 or 4 classes with me a week. Okay. But so some of the classes are the same, you know, I'm running more or less the same. Might be slightly different or whatever, but he'll say you've missed a bit, Shona. Or you know, they'll correct me, or I realize that I've got my mirroring wrong and I've got the wrong side and whatnot. Do you know what? Actually, we just have a giggle about that, and they just know that you're just like you say, you've got this messy life like they have too, but yoga is helping, and that's all that matters really at the end
Yeah,
of the day, isn't it?
absolutely.
It's
It's
wonderful.
how you feel
Yeah.
afterwards,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Okay, so whilst I would love to carry on a lot longer, I'm going to let you finish with talking about any of the things that you've got coming up that you think some of our listeners would be really interested in. What I'll do is I'll also email you to get the links, and then I'll make sure that links will go directly to where you would like people to go if there's anything they're interested in. Tell us a little bit about what you've got coming up shortly, Dina, that some of my listeners might be interested in.
Okay, so mainly because I'm really want to now put out and share all the stuff that I've learned with other yoga teachers. That's a really big passion for me at the moment because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing all this. So I've got together with my lovely friend Abby she's in Norfolk and Norwich. And I'm running a series of trainings there. It's called a Yantra Studio in Norwich, beautiful new studio. And I'm going to run some teacher trainings there, restorative yoga, yoga nidra, chair yoga. I think those are the only ones I'm doing there.
Mm.
And then that's in September over a couple of different weekends. And then I'm in the new year, I'm going to be in London teaching my chair yoga training, it's a brilliant training because I've got now 8 hours of recorded content, but we do a full day in person together. And that's at the Shala, London. So it's in South London. And then I'm going to be doing another Nidra. I'm going to be doing a weekend Nidra training in Cheltenham. It's in the spring, so that's a bit of a way off. Um, so those are the main trainings I've got going on at the moment. And because I'm doing my psychotherapy training, I haven't got any more teacher trainings booked in, but those are those. And then I've
When will
got,
you qualify for your, how much longer have you got?
oh, I've got another year, possibly more, because I've got to get placement hours. So it's a 3-year thing. So it's quite a long and involved training. But I've got some retreats coming up, and I was talking about Goa. Goa is my favorite. It is just so fantastic. Now, I've been with these people who've been running it now for 18 years I've been going, but these people who manage it now for like 16 years, and they've gone from like a bit rustic to they've just got it all sorted out. It's fantastic. So that's over New Year. I'm doing a week over New Year, and then another week in the New Year. So from something like 28th of December to the 4th of January, and then 4th of January to the 11th. So I've got that lovely retreat coming up. I'm also going to Turkey in October, and then I've got
This
my
October?
this October, yeah, going to be in
How do you
Turkey.
fit all this in with all the psychotherapy as well? Is anyone
Gosh,
listening? Is anyone listening to this and thinking, "Whoa, you need yoga to just keep you"?
well, I tell you what, yesterday, on my Sunday, I was sat there updating my website with my next Easter retreat. So I was like, I've got to get that up. And then you start, and then you realize you've got to faff around with other pages and
I
things and
know,
links. And,
I know, I know.
that was a whole palaver, but I've done it. So my next Easter retreat is up.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
So so there's four things there. What I'll do is I'll email you afterwards, ask you for the specific links to each of those, which will make it
yeah,
easier for listeners, and
yeah,
then they can just click on the link and it'll take them straight through, I presume, to the thing. Do you know what the last piece I will say about that is what you've just said makes me smile, because one of the things I find I'm often saying to my students is that they have this vision, or they think this perception in their mind that yoga teachers are really calm Zen people. To which my response is exactly like yours. I burst out laughing and say, no, actually, this is why we do yoga. I'm anything but.
Yeah. Yoga teaches our
What the
people.
Yeah, but what the yoga actually does is help to keep me grounded and sane for the last 50 years. And on that note, Dina, I just have to say thank you so much for sharing so honestly about your journey and the stuff you've gone through. I'm going to pull together some of the key nuggets there from that. So for those of you who are listening, watch out. If you're not on my mailing list, come onto the mailing list because I'll try and share some key nuggets out of Dina's talk as well. Key takeaways that I just think it would be really useful for you to have somewhere. I find sometimes I have key things that people say that really resonate for me that I know I need to take on board. I stick them around my desk or on my, I put them in a diary somewhere where I'm going to see it regularly just to remind me. I would encourage you to do the same. But Dina, thank you so much.